I never imagined my golden years would involve fighting my own son for the right to determine my future. At 73, I had envisioned peaceful mornings in my garden, afternoons volunteering at the local library, and evenings video chatting with my grandchildren, just as I had planned for decades. Instead, I found myself at the center of a family drama that tested not only my resilience, but my understanding of the person I thought I had raised to be a good man. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Wilson. I raised my son Michael alone from the time he was 5 years old, after his father walked out on us with barely a backward glance. We lived in Millfield, a modest working-class town where I worked as a high school English teacher by day and took on evening tutoring to make ends meet. We weren't wealthy by any measure, but I was determined that Michael would have every opportunity I could provide. "We'll make it work," I used to tell him when he noticed other children had more than we did. What matters isn't what we have, but what we do with what we have. For decades, that philosophy guided our lives. While other teachers drove newer cars, I maintained our reliable old station wagon for 15 years to afford Michael's baseball camp and college application fees. When his friends went on spring break trips, I worked additional weekends proctoring exams so he could join them rather than feel left out. My retirement savings grew more slowly than my colleagues, because Michael's education came first. I remember one particular Christmas when Michael was 14. He'd set his heart on a pair of expensive basketball shoes that all his teammates were wearing. The cost was equivalent to nearly a week's salary for me, but the disappointment in his eyes when I initially suggested more affordable alternatives broke my heart. "I'll figure it out," I promised him, not yet knowing how. That December, I picked up extra evening shifts tutoring the children of wealthy families across town, worked weekends at a local bookstore during their holiday rush, and sold my grandmother's antique brooch, one of the few valuable items I owned. On Christmas morning, the expression on Michael's face when he opened that shoebox made every sacrifice worthwhile. "How did you—" he began, his voice trailing off as he held the coveted shoes with reverence. "Santa has his ways," I replied with a wink, not mentioning the 60-hour work weeks or the parting with a family heirloom. All that mattered was his happiness. Was it a perfect balance? Looking back, perhaps not. But raising a child alone means making hard choices, and I made mine with the conviction that investing in his future was my most important responsibility. I wanted Michael to have advantages I never had. The chance to attend college, to pursue a career based on passion rather than necessity, to enter adulthood without the burden of limitations I had known. My own childhood had been marked by instability. My father worked in factories that frequently laid off workers, forcing our family to move from one rental to another in search of employment. My mother cleaned houses to supplement our income, often returning home with hands raw from harsh cleaning. Chemicals. College was never an option for me. I was fortunate to attend teachers' college on a partial scholarship, working nights to cover the remainder of my tuition. "You'll never have to struggle the way I did," I whispered to infant Michael during countless late-night feedings. "I'll make sure of it." When Michael was 10, I managed to secure a mortgage on a small 3-bedroom craftsman house in Millfield, the first home I'd ever owned. It needed work. The kitchen cabinets were worn, the bathroom fixtures outdated, the hardwood floors scratched from years of previous owners. But it was ours. Over school breaks and summer vacations, I gradually renovated it myself, learning from home improvement books borrowed from the library and occasional help from more skilled neighbors. "Mom, why don't we just hire someone to fix the leaky faucet?" Michael asked one Saturday, holding a flashlight for me as I wrestled with a pipe wrench under the bathroom sink. "Because this way, we save money for your college fund," I explained, my voice echoing in the small space. And I learned something new. Knowledge is never wasted, Michael. By the time Michael entered high school, our modest home had transformed through my persistent efforts. The kitchen now featured refurbished cabinets I had sanded and repainted myself. The backyard boasted a vegetable garden that supplemented our grocery budget, and the living room had become a warm space centered around bookshelves I had built from salvaged wood. Michael's academic promise became evident early. His 6th grade teacher suggested advanced placement classes, noting his exceptional writing skills and analytical thinking. By high school, he was taking honors courses and earning recognition for his debate team performances. College recruiters began to take notice of his potential, and my pride was matched only by my anxiety about affording the opportunities he deserved. I took on additional responsibilities at school, supervising after-school programs, coaching, the academic decathlon team, covering classes during planning periods, anything that would provide extra income without taking too much time away from home. My colleagues marveled at my energy. "Eleanor, how do you do it all?" My friend and fellow English teacher Harriet often asked. "You're going to burn out at this pace." "I'll rest when Michael graduates college," I would reply with a laugh that masked my exhaustion. "This is just temporary." But temporary stretched into years, and the habits of sacrifice became so ingrained that I hardly noticed the toll they took on my own dreams. I had once hoped to earn a master's degree in literature, to travel to the settings of my favorite novels, to perhaps even write a book of my own. Those aspirations faded into the background, replaced by the immediacy of tuition payments, textbook costs, and ensuring Michael had every opportunity to succeed. Michael graduated from high school as valedictorian, earning a partial scholarship to State University. It wasn't enough to cover all expenses, but combined with my savings, student loans, and his part-time campus job, we made it work. I attended his graduation ceremony bursting with pride, watching him deliver a speech about perseverance and opportunity that brought the audience to their feet. "I want to thank my mother," he said near the conclusion, looking in my direction. "She taught me that with hard work and determination, any obstacle can be overcome." Those words validated every extra shift, every deferred dream, every moment of exhaustion I had experienced. My son understood the values I had tried to instill. He recognized the sacrifices made on his behalf. Or so I believed at the time. He was accepted to a prestigious law school the following year, adding student loan debt that concerned me. But Michael was confident. "Corporate lawyers at top firms earn 6 figures their first year, Mom," he explained. "The debt is just an investment in my future earnings. I'll be able to pay it off quickly and help you retire comfortably." The promise of eventually being able to support me financially became a common theme in our conversations as Michael progressed through law school, graduated with honors, and secured a position at Maxwell, Brennan & Associates, a corporate firm known for its demanding work, environment, and generous compensation. His rise through the ranks was indeed meteoric. Within 5 years, he had moved from junior associate to senior associate, handling increasingly significant clients and earning bonuses that allowed him to purchase his first condominium in the city. By year 7, he had met and married Amanda, a marketing executive whose career ambitions matched his own. They bought a larger home in an exclusive suburb, started a family, and settled into a lifestyle that revolved around professional achievement and material success. Meanwhile, I continued, teaching in Millfield, finally paying off my mortgage the year before I retired at 68. My teacher's pension provided modest but adequate income, and I supplemented it by tutoring a few students and occasionally substituting when the school was short-staffed. My home remained simple but comfortable, and I found immense satisfaction. In my garden, which had expanded from a practical vegetable plot to include flower beds, native plants, and a small greenhouse I had built myself. "The garden keeps me young," I would tell neighbors who commented on my energy and vitality well into my 70s. "There's nothing like having your hands in the soil to remind you that there's always another season coming." Michael's visits became increasingly infrequent as his professional responsibilities grew. What had once been monthly trips home dwindled to holiday appearances and occasional weekend visits that always seemed rushed. My grandchildren, Emma and James, were growing up knowing me primarily through video calls and the handmade gifts I sent for birthdays and Christmas. "We're just so busy, Mom," Michael would explain when I expressed hope for more frequent visits. "Between the kids' activities, our work schedules, and the long drive, it's hard to get away." I understood the demands of raising children while balancing careers. Hadn't I managed as a single mother with far fewer resources? But I kept these thoughts to myself, not wanting to strain our relationship with complaints or guilt. Instead, I focused on making the most of our limited time together and maintaining my own active, fulfilling life in Millfield. My routine in retirement revolved around community engagement. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays were dedicated to volunteering at the Millfield Public Library, where I helped organize events, led children's story time, and assisted with the adult literacy program. Tuesdays were reserved for my garden, particularly during growing season. Thursday evenings, my book club met at rotating members' homes, a tradition we had maintained for nearly 3 decades. Weekends often included farmers' market visits, community cleanups, or special events at the library. "You're busier in retirement than you were teaching," Harriet often observed during our weekly coffee dates. She had retired the same year I did, and our friendship had deepened as we navigated this new phase of life together. "I like having purpose," I would respond. "The structure keeps me sharp." What I didn't say was that the full calendar also helped fill the spaces left by my increasingly distant son and grandchildren. The ache of their absence was something I learned to live with, a dull pain that occasionally flared during holidays or when I heard others speak of their children's frequent visits and attentive care. Michael and Amanda's attitudes toward my independent lifestyle became increasingly tinged with concern that felt patronizing rather than genuine. "Mom, do you really need to climb a ladder to clean your gutters?" Michael would ask during his rare visits, noticing the maintenance I performed myself. "You should hire someone for that kind of thing at your age. Mrs. Delaney next door is 91 and still cleans her own gutters," I'd reply lightly. "I'm only 73 and in excellent health according to Dr. Marshall." These exchanges became more frequent and less subtle as I entered my 70s. Michael began sending links to senior living communities, forwarding articles about aging, in-place modifications, and making comments about friends whose parents had made the smart choice to downsize to maintenance-free apartments. "Just looking out for your future," he would say when I deflected these suggestions. "You can't manage that house forever, Mom." His concern might have seemed more genuine if it weren't accompanied by occasional remarks about the wasted value in my home. "This neighborhood has really appreciated," he commented during his Christmas visit the year I turned 72. "You're sitting on considerable equity that could be better utilized for your retirement comfort." The comment stung, reducing my beloved home, the space I had created through decades of personal labor and care, to a financial asset that wasn't being properly exploited. I changed the subject, but the underlying message lingered. My son viewed my independence as temporary, my home as a resource to be liquidated, and my preferences as secondary to what he determined was sensible. What Michael failed to recognize was that my home wasn't merely shelter or an investment. It was the physical embodiment of my life's work, a space transformed by my own hands from a rundown house to a nurturing home. Each repair I had learned, to make each garden bed I had built, each room I had painted represented my growth, my self-reliance, my creativity. The home contained not just my belongings but tangible memories of raising my son and building a life on my own terms. The trajectory of our relationship changed dramatically on April 15th last year, when unprecedented spring floods devastated our region. Millfield sits near the junction of 2 rivers, and when both overflowed their banks after 3 days of torrential rain, the town experienced the worst flooding in its 100-year history. I was at the library when the evacuation orders came, My friend and fellow volunteer Harriet insisted on driving me home to grab essential medications and documents before the roads became impassable. We had barely 15 minutes to collect what we could before water began seeping under my front door. "Just the essentials, Eleanor," Harriet urged as I stood frozen in my living room, overwhelmed by what to save and what to leave behind. "We need to leave now." I grabbed my medications, important papers, photo albums, and a few changes of clothes. As we pulled away, I watched water creeping up my beloved garden, already submerging the spring tulips and daffodils I had planted the previous fall. The greenhouse, my pride and joy, was already half submerged, its glass panels reflecting the gray sky as water rose around it. "It will be okay," Harriet assured me, though her voice lacked conviction. "The water will recede." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of emergency shelters, FEMA registrations, and insurance claims. Millfield's community center was transformed into a disaster relief headquarters, with hundreds of displaced residents seeking assistance and temporary housing. I was fortunate to have comprehensive flood insurance, a precaution I had taken years earlier after a minor basement flooding incident, but the process of documenting damage and navigating claims forms was overwhelming. Through it all, I kept expecting Michael to appear. I had left urgent messages explaining the situation, texted photos of the damage once I was allowed to briefly return and inspect my home, and explicitly asked for his help navigating the insurance process given his legal expertise. Surely this emergency would bring my son back to me, would remind him of his frequent promises to take care of me when I needed it. His response came not in person, but via a brief phone call 3 weeks after the flood. "Mom, I've been swamped with a major case," he explained, his voice carrying the distracted tone I had become familiar with over the years. "The Williams merger is at a critical stage, and I can't leave the city right now. But I've been thinking about your situation, and I think this is actually an opportunity in disguise." "An opportunity?" I repeated, confused by his framing of a disaster that had left me temporarily homeless, with my belongings ruined and my garden, the joy of my retirement, destroyed. "Yes," he continued enthusiastically, "the insurance payout could be your down payment on a senior living apartment near us. There's a really nice facility just 20 minutes from our house, Evergreen Meadows. No more home maintenance, no more flood risks, and you'd be close enough that we could visit regularly." The suggestion left me momentarily speechless. I was calling for support with insurance claims for home repairs, not for help relocating to an institution 3 hours away from my community. The casual way he proposed uprooting my entire life, presented as if he were doing me a favor, revealed how little he understood what mattered to me. "Michael, I'm planning to repair my home," I said finally, keeping my voice steady despite the hurt and disappointment threatening to overwhelm me. "The insurance adjuster thinks the damage is substantial but repairable. I have flood insurance, precisely for situations like this." His sigh carried clearly through the phone, heavy with what sounded like a mixture of frustration and patronizing patience. "Mom, be realistic. You're 73. Do you really want to deal with contractors and rebuilding at your age? Start over with a new garden? This is the perfect time to make a sensible transition to a living situation that's appropriate for someone in your stage of life." "My stage of life?" I repeated, a chill running through me at the dismissive categorization. I was managing my home perfectly well before the flood, and I'll manage it again after repairs. This is where my life is, Michael. My friends, my volunteer work, my community. Friends move. Volunteer work can be found anywhere. Community is portable, he countered, his tone now that of the attorney making a closing argument. What's not? Portable is the level of care and security you'll eventually need. Evergreen Meadows has a continuum of care model. You start in independent living, but can transition to assisted living or skilled nursing as needed, all in the same facility. It's the pragmatic choice. We'll discuss it when I come down next. "Weekend," he said before I could form a response. his tone making it clear he considered the matter far from settled. "I'll bring some brochures from Evergreen Meadows. It's really a lovely place, more like a resort than a retirement home." But Michael didn't come the next weekend, or the weekend after. May turned to June, and I remained in temporary housing, a small apartment provided through my insurance policy, while contractors assessed the damage to my home and prepared renovation estimates. The insurance company had been responsive, confirming that my policy would cover most repairs. But the process was slow due to the widespread damage throughout the region. During this limbo period, I discovered an unexpected silver lining. The Isai community center where I had occasionally taught adult literacy classes had remained undamaged and was offering free workshops for flood victims. One caught my eye. Digital Skills for Seniors, taught by Zoe Chen, a young tech entrepreneur who had recently moved to Millfield to care for her grandmother. My grandmother never thought she could learn tech skills at 82, Zoe told our small class of seniors during the first session. Now she runs an Etsy shop selling her handmade bookmarks and video chats with family around the world. Ch is just a number when it comes to digital literacy. Something about Zoe's approach, patient, practical, and entirely free of condescension, resonated deeply with me. While the other workshops I attended focused on coping with loss or navigating assistance programs, Zoe's class offered something different: agency and possibility. She didn't speak to us as victims or as elderly people with limitations. She addressed us as capable learners with untapped potential. "Technology isn't just for the young," she insisted during our second class. "It's for anyone who wants to connect, create, or contribute. The barriers to entry have never been lower, and the opportunities have never been greater." Under Zoe's guidance, I created my first proper email address, learned to navigate social media platforms, and discovered the basics of digital photography, using the smartphone I had reluctantly purchased the previous year but barely knew how to operate. Each new skill built my confidence, providing welcome distraction from the uncertainty surrounding my home repairs and my son's increasing pressure to relocate. When Michael finally visited in late June, more than 2 months after the flood, I had already completed the basic digital skills course and enrolled in Zoe's advanced workshop on online entrepreneurship. My temporary apartment was covered with sticky notes of passwords, digital marketing terms, and website design concepts. I had opened social media accounts, created a Gmail address that wasn't my full name with my birth year, and was learning to take professional quality photos with my newly purchased smartphone. Michael noticed none of this. He arrived with a portfolio containing brochures from Evergreen Meadows, printouts of my insurance policy, and a draft power of attorney document that would grant him control over my financial affairs. "I've been researching the best approach to your situation," he announced, spreading the materials across my small kitchen table without asking about my well-being or how I'd been coping during the months he'd been absent. "The insurance payout should be approximately $187,000, based on my analysis of your policy and the damage reports. That's enough for the entry fee at Evergreen Meadows with some left over to supplement your teacher's pension." "And what about repairing my home?" I asked, carefully controlling my tone despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "I've spoken with a real estate agent," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Given the flood damage and the age of the house, the best approach is to sell it as is to an investor who can do a complete renovation. They're offering $130,000, which isn't what you might have gotten pre-flood, but it's reasonable considering the circumstances." My mind reeled at the revelation. "You've already discussed selling my home with a real estate agent? Without consulting me?" "Mom, I'm trying to handle things efficiently," he replied with visible impatience. "You've been through a trauma, you're in temporary housing, and these decisions are complicated. I'm using my professional expertise to navigate the best path forward." "The best path for whom?" I asked quietly. The question hung between us, momentarily piercing his confident demeanor. For the first time since his arrival, Michael truly looked at me, At the sticky notes on the walls, the notebook opened to a page titled Business Plan Development, the new laptop on the counter. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing toward the unfamiliar evidence of my recent activities. "This is my path forward," I replied, straightening in my chair. "I've been taking digital skills classes while waiting for the home repairs to begin. I'm developing an online business based on my teaching experience." Michael's laugh held no humor, only dismissal. "Mom, be serious. You can barely use your flip phone. This isn't the time for hobbies. We need to make practical decisions about your future." "My future is mine to determine," I stated firmly. "And I've decided I'm repairing my home and staying in Millfield. I've already selected a contractor and approved the repair plans. Work begins next week." His expression hardened, the attorney emerging fully now. "That's not financially prudent. The insurance money would be better utilized securing your long-term care needs. At your age, home ownership is an unnecessary burden." "At my age," I repeated, the phrase igniting something fierce within me. "You? Keep referring to my age as if it's a condition that requires management, as if turning 73 somehow rendered me incapable of making my own decisions." "It's not about capability," he countered, his tone now the one he likely used with difficult clients. "It's about practicality. The flood is a sign that it's time for a transition we should have made years ago." I studied my son's face, the boy I had raised alone, sacrificing consistently to provide him every advantage, now sitting across from me fully convinced that he knew better than I did what was best for my life. The realization was both painful and clarifying. "Michael," I said after a moment, "I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. I'm repairing my home and staying in Millfield. The insurance payout will be used as intended, to restore my property." "You're not thinking clearly," he insisted, gathering his materials with evident frustration. "I'll give you some time to review these brochures and reconsider. The offer on your house won't last forever, and neither will the opening at Evergreen Meadows." As he prepared to leave, he placed a business card on the table. "This is Dennis Marshall, the insurance adjuster I've been consulting with. He's expecting your call to discuss directing the payout appropriately." After Michael left, I examined the card, an uneasy feeling growing in my stomach. Why would my son be working with an insurance adjuster I hadn't hired or even met? Why was he so fixated on controlling the insurance payout rather than helping me rebuild? I called my insurance company the next morning and discovered something that shattered whatever trust remained between my son and me. There was no Dennis Marshall working with my claim. The adjuster assigned to my case was a woman named Rebecca Saunders, and according to her records, Michael had contacted the insurance company multiple times attempting to have the claim settlement check redirected to his address, claiming I was not in a condition to manage the funds appropriately. The betrayal cut deep, not just the attempted financial manipulation, but the fundamental disrespect it represented. My son, the child I had raised with such sacrifice and love, had decided that my autonomy was dispensable, my wishes irrelevant, and my resources his to direct. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that during those months he had been too busy to help his displaced mother. I had been building something he couldn't imagine, a new vision for my future, new skills for the digital age, and most importantly, a new understanding of my own resilience and capabilities. His assumption that I would quietly submit to his plans was about to be challenged in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The flood had washed away many things, but it had also cleared the ground for something unexpected to take root and flourish. Little did Michael know that his mother, the English teacher who had only recently upgraded from a flip phone, was about to demonstrate just how misguided his assumptions about age and capability truly were. The shocking decision I would make wasn't just about standing up to his manipulations. It was about reimagining what the next chapter of my life could be, on my own terms. The morning after discovering Michael's deception, I sat at my temporary apartment's small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, staring at the business card he had left behind. Dennis Marshall. A name invented to facilitate my son's plan to control my insurance settlement. The betrayal felt physical, like a dull ache beneath my ribs that wouldn't subside. For hours after speaking with Rebecca Saunders, my actual insurance adjuster, I had cycled through emotions. Shock that gave way to hurt that transformed into anger that eventually crystallized into resolve. Sleep had come fitfully, my mind racing with fragmented memories of Michael's childhood alongside the hard reality of his recent actions. How had the boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with such care become the man who would lie to gain control of my finances? The ringing of my cell phone jolted me from my thoughts. Zoe Chen's name appeared on the screen. My digital skills. Instructor calling about our scheduled one-on-one session that afternoon. "Eleanor, is everything okay? You sound exhausted," she said when I answered, my voice betraying my emotional state despite my attempt at normalcy. Before I could construct a polite deflection, the story spilled out. Michael's absence after the flood, his pressure to sell my home and move to Evergreen Meadows, and finally, his attempt to redirect my insurance settlement. Zoe listened without interruption, making only occasional sounds of acknowledgement as I detailed the betrayal in all its painful specificity. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," she said when I finally fell silent. "Family situations like this are unfortunately common after disasters. They expose fault lines in relationships that might otherwise remain hidden for years." "I keep wondering where I went wrong," I admitted, the words catching in my throat. How did I raise someone who would do this? Who would see me as an obstacle rather than a person with my own wishes? "From what you've told me about Michael's upbringing, you didn't go wrong," Zoe replied firmly. "People make their own choices as adults, regardless of how they were raised. The question now is what you want to do about this situation." Her pragmatic approach cut through my spiral of self-recrimination, redirecting my focus to something more productive. Action. "I need to protect myself," I said, clarity beginning to emerge from the emotional fog. "My insurance settlement, my home, my independence, all of it." "That's exactly right," Zoe agreed. "Instead of our scheduled lesson on digital marketing fundamentals, why don't I come over now? I think we need to develop a different kind of strategy." 90 minutes later, Zoe arrived at my apartment with her laptop, a portable printer, and a determination that matched my own. At 32, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had navigated significant challenges and emerged stronger for the experience. Her grandmother's dementia diagnosis had brought her back to Millfield from a promising tech career in Seattle, but rather than viewing this return as a setback, she had transformed it into an opportunity to serve her community while continuing her work remotely. "First things first," she said, setting up her equipment on my kitchen table. "We need to secure your insurance settlement. Let's contact Rebecca Saunders immediately and establish clear communication protocols so Michael can't intercept information or payments." With Zoe's guidance, I called Rebecca and explained the situation fully, including my concerns about Michael's attempts to redirect funds. The adjuster's response was reassuring. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing often with adult children and elderly parents after disasters," she explained. "I'll flag your file with special instructions that any disbursements must go directly to you, with verbal confirmation required. And I'm sending a password-protected form for you to specify exactly where you want funds deposited." "Thank you," I said, relief evident in my voice. I never imagined I'd need protection from my own son. Family financial manipulation is more common than most people realize, Rebecca replied gently. "You're not alone in this, and you're taking the right steps to protect yourself." After ending the call, Zoe helped me draft emails to both my insurance company and the contractor I had selected, explicitly stating that all communications should come directly to me and that no one else was authorized to make decisions regarding my claim or home repairs. We should also contact your bank, Zoe suggested, opening a new document on her laptop. Let's make sure all your accounts are secure and that no one can access them without your explicit permission. And while we're at it, let's check if Michael has been named on any of your accounts as a convenience signer or beneficiary. The bank review revealed something I had forgotten. Years earlier, when I had briefly been hospitalized for pneumonia, I had added Michael as a convenience signer on my checking account, just in case. At the time, it had seemed like a prudent precaution. Now it represented a significant vulnerability. We need to change this immediately, Zoe advised, already searching for the nearest branch location. A convenience signer has full access to withdraw funds. Given what we know about Michael's intentions, this is too risky to leave in place. That afternoon became a crash course in financial self-protection. We visited my bank, where I removed Michael as a convenience signer and added additional security measures to my accounts. We contacted Social Security to ensure my monthly benefits were being correctly deposited. We reviewed my will and advance directives, which thankfully remained in my possession rather than Michael's. I've been thinking, I said as we walked back to the apartment, the spring sunshine a stark contrast to my somber mood. This isn't just about protecting what I have now. It's about creating a future where I'm truly independent, where Michael or anyone else can't claim I'm incapable of managing my own affairs. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the right perspective. The best defense against others controlling your life is to demonstrate clear capability and purpose. My digital skills classes with you, they feel more important now than ever, I continued. Not just as a hobby or distraction during displacement, but as a pathway to something more substantial. I've been impressed by how quickly you're learning, Zoe said, her expression serious. Many of my students take weeks to grasp concepts you've picked up in days. You mentioned you were developing a business idea based on your teaching experience? Tell me more about that. As we walked, I outlined the concept I had been developing. An online tutoring service specifically for high school students struggling with writing and literary analysis, skills that had formed the core of my teaching. Career for decades. I explained how my retirement had coincided with budget cuts that eliminated many remedial programs in schools, leaving students without the individualized attention they often needed to succeed. There's a real gap in affordable, quality writing instruction, I explained, my passion for the subject temporarily displacing my concerns about Michael. Many expensive tutoring services focus on standardized test preparation or math and science, neglecting the fundamental communication skills students need for college and career success. And you're uniquely qualified to fill that gap, Zoe observed, opening the door to my apartment building. You have expertise from your teaching career, understanding of educational standards, and experience working with diverse learning styles. Exactly, I agreed as we entered the elevator. I've helped hundreds of students improve their writing over my career. Before the flood, I was tutoring a few local students in my home, but the digital approach could reach so many more. Back in my apartment, Zoe opened her laptop again, this time pulling up a digital business planning template. Let's develop this further. A legitimate business with demonstrable income would be powerful evidence of your capability and independence. For the next several hours, we transformed my vague concept into a concrete business plan. Zoe's tech expertise complemented my educational background perfectly. She explained options for service delivery platforms, scheduling software, and secure payment processing, while I outlined curriculum approaches, assessment methods, and potential marketing strategies to reach students and parents. English with Eleanor, Zoe suggested as we brainstormed business names. It's personal, memorable, and conveys exactly what you're offering. I like that, I agreed, feeling a spark of excitement despite the circumstances that had precipitated this planning session. Simple, but distinctive. By evening, we had created a comprehensive strategy. A basic website would launch within 2 weeks, offering one-on-one video tutoring sessions focused on essay writing, literary analysis, and college application personal statements. I would start with limited hours while home repairs were underway, then expand as my situation stabilized. Zoe would help with the technical aspects while teaching me to eventually manage them independently. "This isn't just a business plan," Zoe said as she packed up her equipment. "It's your declaration of independence. Every student you help, every dollar you earn independently, every digital skill you master, they all reinforce your autonomy." After Zoe left, I sat in the quiet apartment, reviewing our work with a growing sense of purpose. The day had begun in despair over Michael's betrayal, but was ending with something unexpected: hope. Not just hope that I could protect myself from my son's manipulations, but hope for a new chapter that I was actively writing for myself. The following morning, Rebecca Saunders called with news that the insurance company had approved my claim in full. The settlement check would be issued directly to me within 10 business days, with portions released to contractors according to the repair schedule I had approved. "I've noted in your file that all disbursements require verbal confirmation from you personally," she assured me, "and I've documented the unauthorized attempts by your son to redirect the settlement." "Thank you for taking this seriously," I said, relief evident in my voice. "We consider this a form of potential financial abuse," Rebecca replied, her tone professional but kind. "Unfortunately, it's something we're trained to watch for, particularly with older claimants." After we hung up, I contacted the contractor, who would be handling my home repairs, confirming our start date and reviewing the renovation plans. The flood damage, while extensive, had also created an opportunity to make some updates I had been considering for years: more accessible bathroom fixtures, an improved layout for my greenhouse, elevated garden beds that would be easier to tend as I aged. "These modifications are smart," the contractor, Jim Reeves, commented during our meeting later that day. "They'll make your home more functional for the long term while respecting its original character." "That's exactly what I want," I replied. "I'm planning to be in this home for many more years. These changes will make that more practical." Jim nodded approvingly. Too often, people make the mistake of thinking older folks can't or shouldn't remain in their homes. With the right adaptations, aging in place is absolutely viable, often preferable, both emotionally and financially. His matter-of-fact support for my decision to remain in my home was refreshing after Michael's constant pressure to relocate. Jim saw no contradiction between my age and my desire to rebuild. He simply focused on creating solutions that would accommodate changing needs over time. As renovation plans progressed, I threw myself into developing English with Eleanor. Each morning began with digital skills lessons from YouTube tutorials Zoe had recommended. Afternoons were dedicated to creating sample lesson plans, evaluation rubrics, and marketing materials. Evenings often included video calls with Zoe, who patiently guided me through website development using a template designed for small service businesses. "You're picking this up remarkably fast," she commented during one session as I successfully added content to my website without assistance. "Most of my students take much longer to get comfortable with the technical aspects. I've had a lifetime of learning new things out of necessity," I replied, thinking of all the household skills I had taught myself as a single mother. "When you can't afford to hire experts, you become one yourself." The website launched 3 weeks after my discovery of Michael's deception. It was simple but professional, featuring my teaching credentials, testimonials from former students, and clear descriptions of services offered. Zoe helped me set up a Google business profile and basic social media accounts to increase visibility. Within days, I received my first inquiry from the parent of a struggling high school junior. My initial sessions were conducted from my temporary apartment, using equipment Zoe had helped me select: a refurbished laptop with enhanced audio capabilities, a ring light for better video quality, and a professional headset for clear communication. I transformed a corner of the living area into a makeshift office space, with bookshelves creating a backdrop that reflected my educational focus. The first session with 16-year-old Aiden was a revelation. His struggles with essay organization were exactly the kind of challenges I had addressed countless times in my teaching career. The digital format felt different initially, but the fundamental process of identifying a student's specific needs and tailoring instruction accordingly remained the same. By the end of our hour together, Aiden had a clear outline for his assignment and specific strategies to improve his writing process. "That was amazing," his mother wrote in an email that evening. "Aiden said you explained things more clearly, in 1 hour, than his teachers have all year. We'd like to book a regular weekly session." That first success boosted my confidence tremendously. Within 3 weeks, I had 5 regular students and several one-time sessions scheduled. The income was modest but growing, tangible evidence of my continuing professional value and self-sufficiency. More importantly, each successful session reinforced what I had always known, but Michael had seemingly forgotten. Age had not diminished my capabilities or contributions. Meanwhile, repairs on my home were progressing well. Jim sent regular updates, with photos documenting the transformation from flood-damaged to renewed. The hardwood floors I had refinished myself years earlier were being restored. The kitchen cabinets I had painted were being repaired rather than replaced, preserving the character I valued. My greenhouse was being rebuilt on a slightly elevated foundation with improved accessibility features. Throughout this period, Michael made several attempts to contact me. His calls became increasingly frequent as the insurance settlement date approached, his voicemails shifting from concerned to frustrated when I didn't immediately respond. I wasn't ignoring him completely, but I was careful to maintain boundaries, replying with brief texts confirming I was well but busy with projects I didn't specify. "Mom, we need to discuss your settlement funds before you make any impulsive decisions," he said in one particularly telling message. "These amounts can be overwhelming to manage without professional guidance." I listened to his messages but rarely called back, using the breathing space to strengthen my position before our inevitable confrontation. Each day without direct contact was another day to build my business, advance my home repairs, and document my clear cognitive and financial competence. 6 weeks after discovering Michael's attempted financial manipulation, my insurance settlement was finalized. The funds were deposited directly into my newly secured account, with portions earmarked for specific renovation expenses. The same day, I received confirmation that my tutoring business had been properly registered with state authorities, complete with necessary tax documentation, all accomplished with Zoe's guidance but under my own authority. That evening, Zoe and I celebrated these milestones with dinner at her grandmother's home. At 84, Margaret Chen was living proof that age need not define capability. Despite early-stage dementia that affected her short-term memory, she maintained an active Etsy shop selling hand-embroidered bookmarks, managed with adaptations that worked around her cognitive challenges. "The doctors told me to prepare for winding down," Margaret commented as she served homemade dumplings that put restaurant versions to shame. "I told them I'll wind down when I'm good and ready, not when their charts say I should." Her matter-of-fact defiance of limiting expectations resonated deeply with me. Over dinner, the 3 of us discussed strategies for my eventual confrontation with Michael, which I knew couldn't be postponed indefinitely. "You should meet on your terms, not his," Margaret advised, her decades of experience as a school principal evident in her approach to conflict. "Choose the location, the timing, and the witnesses carefully." "Witnesses are crucial," Zoe agreed. "Someone Michael perceives as a neutral professional rather than just your friend." "My attorney would be ideal," I mused, "but I haven't needed legal services since updating my will 5 years ago. I'm not sure if that firm is still operating." "You need more than just any attorney," Zoe said thoughtfully. You need someone who specializes in elder law and understands the specific dynamics of adult children attempting to control their parents' finances. The following day, I researched elder law specialists in our region and scheduled a consultation with Patricia Vega, an attorney whose practice focused exclusively on protecting older adults' autonomy and assets. Her office was located in Lawrenceville, a larger town 30 minutes from Millfield, which offered the added benefit of privacy. Unlikely to be observed by local acquaintances who might mention my legal consultation to Michael during his inquiries. Patricia's office reflected her specialization: wide doorways accommodating mobility aids, adjustable lighting for varying visual needs, sound-absorbing panels for clients with hearing aids. She greeted me with professional warmth, listened attentively to my situation, and took detailed notes without interruption. "Unfortunately, what you're describing is common enough that it has a name in our field," she said when I had finished, recounting Michael's actions. "It's a form of financial exploitation called inheritance impatience, combined with elements of substituted judgment, adult children deciding what they believe is best for a parent without regard for the parent's actual wishes." "Is what he's done illegal?" I asked, uncertain where ethical breaches crossed into legal violations. "Attempting to redirect your insurance settlement by misrepresenting your capacity certainly crosses ethical lines and could potentially violate insurance fraud statutes," Patricia explained. "His presentation of a fictitious insurance adjuster might constitute impersonation or misrepresentation, but proving these as crimes would be challenging without more concrete evidence." She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. "The more pressing concern is protecting you going forward. Based on the pattern you've described, Michael is likely to escalate his efforts, particularly as he realizes you're taking steps to maintain independence." For the next hour, Patricia outlined comprehensive protective measures, some of which I had already implemented with Zoe's help: securing financial accounts, documenting all interactions, establishing clear communications with service providers. She recommended additional steps, including a new advance directive explicitly naming someone other than Michael as my healthcare proxy, and establishing a revocable trust with specific provisions regarding my home. "You should also document your current cognitive status," she advised. "A neuropsychological evaluation would establish a baseline of your cognitive capabilities, making it more difficult for anyone to later claim you were incapacitated during this period." The suggestion made practical sense but stung emotionally. The idea that I needed to prove my mental competence to prevent my own son from seizing control of my affairs was profoundly painful. Yet I recognized the necessity of protecting myself with every available tool. "I'll arrange for an evaluation," I agreed, "and update my legal documents as you've suggested." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Ms. Wilson, I work with elders in similar situations every day. The hardest part is often the emotional reconciliation, accepting that a loved one's actions require these protective measures. Please know that seeking this protection doesn't diminish the love you've given as a parent. It simply acknowledges the reality you're facing now." Her compassionate framing helped me separate Michael's actions from my worth as a mother, a distinction I had been struggling to maintain. I left her office with a detailed action plan, scheduled follow-up appointments, and something even more valuable: validation from a professional that my desire for autonomy was both reasonable and worth defending. The neuropsychological evaluation was scheduled for the following week with Dr. Elaine Moss, a specialist recommended by Patricia. In the meantime, I continued building my tutoring business, which had grown to 8 regular students and several occasional clients. The modest income was less important than the documented activity, evidence of ongoing professional engagement, that directly countered any narrative of diminished capability. Home repairs were proceeding on schedule, with Jim providing weekly written reports and photographs documenting progress. The water-damaged walls had been replaced, electrical systems updated, and floors refinished. My beloved garden was being reconstructed with improved drainage systems and raised beds that would require less bending and kneeling. Practical adaptations for aging without sacrificing the joy of gardening. Throughout this period, Michael's attempts to contact me became increasingly insistent. His messages referenced concerns about your decision-making and the need for family intervention. During one particularly revealing call, which I allowed to go to voicemail, he mentioned speaking with healthcare providers who specialize in geriatric transitions, a euphemism that sent a chill through me. Was he exploring ways to have me declared incompetent? This possibility accelerated my timeline for securing protections. I completed the neuropsychological evaluation with Dr. Moss, who conducted a thorough assessment of my cognitive functions, memory, reasoning, and judgment. Her conclusion was unequivocal. I demonstrated above-average cognitive abilities for my age group, with no indications of impairment that would affect decision-making capacity. Your results are quite impressive, Dr. Moss noted during our feedback session. Your verbal reasoning and problem-solving skills are particularly strong, and your memory functions show no concerning deficits. Does this evaluation provide legal protection? I asked, thinking of Patricia's advice. It establishes a clear baseline of cognitive functioning that would be difficult to challenge, she confirmed. I've documented that you demonstrate full capacity to make complex financial, medical, and residential decisions. This report would carry significant weight if your capacity were ever questioned in legal proceedings. With the evaluation complete and documentation secured, I met again with Patricia to finalize my updated legal protections. We created a new advance directive naming Harriet as my healthcare proxy rather than Michael. We established a revocable trust for my home and major assets, with carefully structured provisions that would make it difficult for anyone to challenge my management of these resources. We drafted a letter formally revoking any previous powers or authorities Michael might claim regarding my affairs. The final piece, Patricia said during our third meeting, is confronting Michael directly about his actions and your decisions. Given his behavior, I strongly recommend this conversation take place with witnesses present, ideally in my office with me present. I agree, I said, thinking of how Michael's attorney persona emerged when he felt challenged. Having legal representation present would balance the dynamic. Patricia nodded approvingly. I suggest we schedule this meeting soon, before he takes any additional steps based on misconceptions about your capacity or intentions. We selected a date the following week, giving me time to prepare emotionally and practically for what would undoubtedly be a difficult confrontation. Patricia would contact Michael with a formal request for a family consultation regarding Eleanor Wilson's estate planning and recovery decisions, wording designed to ensure his attendance without revealing the full nature of the meeting. As the date approached, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions: anticipatory anxiety about the confrontation, sadness about the deterioration of our relationship, but also a growing confidence in the path I had chosen. I was no longer reacting to Michael's manipulations, but proactively asserting my autonomy and vision for my future. The day before our scheduled meeting, I visited my home to check on the renovation progress. The transformation was remarkable. Spaces that had been water-damaged and moldy were now clean and renewed. The contractor had preserved the character I valued, while incorporating subtle adaptations for aging in place. Liver door handles instead of knobs, slightly wider doorways, a curbless shower in the bathroom. Standing in my partially restored garden, now redesigned with raised beds and improved pathways, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where I belonged, in the home I had created, the community I had helped build, surrounded by the evidence of my own capability and determination. The flood had damaged my physical environment, but ultimately strengthened my resolve and clarified my priorities. My reflections were interrupted by the chime of a text message. Michael, announcing he would be attending tomorrow's meeting at Patricia's office. "Looking forward to finally addressing your situation properly," he wrote, the phrasing revealing his continued belief that my affairs required his management. I smiled slightly as I pocketed my phone, thinking of all he didn't yet know. The tutoring business growing steadily, the home repairs nearing completion, the legal protections already in place, the documentation of my cognitive capacity, and most importantly, the clarity and determination I had discovered during these challenging months. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but I was ready, not just to defend against Michael's attempts to control my life, but to assert my vision for a future he couldn't imagine. One where his 73-year-old mother wasn't diminished by age, but empowered by experience, adaptation, and unwavering self-determination. The flood had washed away much, but what remained was stronger, clearer, and more resilient than before. Michael had abandoned me when I needed him most, but in that abandonment, I had rediscovered capabilities and courage I had forgotten I possessed. The shocking decision he would learn about tomorrow wasn't just about keeping my home or starting a business. It was about reclaiming the agency he had tried to take from me and using it to create a third act he had never imagined possible. The morning of my scheduled meeting with Michael dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence I felt as I prepared to confront my only child. I dressed carefully in a tailored navy pantsuit I had purchased specifically for this occasion, professional, dignified attire that projected confidence rather than the comfortable casual clothing Michael was accustomed to seeing me wear. Appearance matters in these situations, Patricia had advised during our preparation session. Dress as you would for a job interview or important presentation. Visual cues of competence and professionalism will reinforce the message we're conveying. Harriet arrived at my temporary apartment at 9 o'clock to drive me to Patricia's office in Lawrenceville. As my oldest friend and newly designated healthcare proxy, she had insisted on being present for moral support, though we had agreed she would wait in the reception area during the actual meeting. "You look formidable," she commented approvingly as I emerged from the apartment. "Michael won't know what hit him." "I'm aiming for capable professional, rather than battle-ready warrior," I replied with a smile that didn't quite mask my nervousness. "But I'll take formidable." During the 30-minute drive, Harriet maintained a stream of supportive conversation, carefully avoiding topics that might heighten my anxiety. Instead, she shared updates on mutual friends, community recovery efforts, after the flood, and amusing anecdotes from her grandchildren's recent visit. Her normalcy was grounding, a reminder that beyond this difficult confrontation lay the ordinary rhythms of life and friendship that had sustained me for decades. We arrived at Patricia's office 45 minutes before the scheduled meeting. Time, a deliberate strategy to ensure I would be settled and composed when Michael arrived. Patricia greeted us personally, escorting us to a comfortable conference room where documents were already arranged on the polished oak table. "Everything is prepared," she assured me, indicating the materials before us. "We have the neuropsychological evaluation, the business registration documents, the contractor reports, the updated legal instruments, and documentation of the attempted insurance redirection. Michael will enter this room expecting to take control, but will instead encounter comprehensive evidence of your capability and autonomy." The strategy was clear. Rather than engaging in an emotional confrontation about Michael's betrayal, we would present objective evidence of my competence and independent decision-making. The emotional aspects weren't irrelevant, but leading with documentation would establish a factual foundation that Michael's legal training would recognize as significant. As we reviewed the materials one final time, Patricia's assistant appeared at the door. "Ms. Vega, Mr. Wilson has arrived. He's 15 minutes early and asking to speak with his mother privately before the meeting." Patricia raised an eyebrow questioningly in my direction. "No," I said firmly. "The meeting proceeds as planned, with you present throughout." She nodded, approvingly. Please inform Mr. Wilson that we'll begin at the scheduled time, and that private consultation isn't possible given the nature of today's discussion. While we waited for the appointed hour, Patricia walked me through breathing exercises designed to maintain composure during potentially emotional exchanges. Remember, you're in control of this meeting, she reminded me. You've taken all the right steps to protect yourself. This is about informing Michael of decisions already made, not seeking his approval or permission. At precisely 11 o'clock, Patricia's assistant escorted Michael into the conference room. His expression shifted rapidly from professional confidence to confused wariness as he registered the formal setting, the arranged documents, and Patricia's presence at my side. "Mom?" he questioned, momentarily faltering before his attorney persona reasserted itself. I wasn't expecting such a formal arrangement for our family discussion. "Please sit down, Michael," I said, gesturing to the chair across from us. "This is Patricia Vega, my attorney. Given the nature of our discussion today, I felt legal representation was appropriate." His eyes narrowed slightly as he took the offered seat, his briefcase placed precisely before him on the table. "I see. I would have brought counsel had I known this was the direction you wanted to take." "You're welcome to reschedule if you feel legal representation is necessary," Patricia offered smoothly. "However, today's meeting is primarily informational, advising. You have decisions Ms. Wilson has already made, rather than negotiating any points requiring counsel." Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sure we can proceed. As my mother's son and legal advisor, I'm qualified to receive whatever information she wishes to share." "To clarify," Patricia interjected before I could respond, "you are not currently serving as your mother's legal advisor in any formal capacity. She has engaged this firm for that purpose. Is that your understanding as well?" The question was precise, designed to establish boundaries from the outset. Michael hesitated momentarily before offering a tight nod. "With that understanding, we can begin," Patricia continued, turning to me. "Ms. Wilson, would you like to open our discussion?" I had rehearsed this moment extensively, but facing my son, the child I had raised alone, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, made the prepared. Words momentarily stick in my throat. I took a deep breath, centering myself before speaking. "Michael, I've asked you here today because there are several important matters I need to communicate clearly," I began, my voice steadier than I had anticipated. "First, I want to address your actions regarding my insurance settlement following the flood." I opened a folder containing documentation from the insurance company, including records of Michael's attempts to redirect my settlement payment. "I am aware that you contacted my insurance company multiple times, claiming I was not in a condition to manage funds appropriately, and attempted to have my settlement redirected to your address. I'm also aware that you presented someone named Dennis Marshall as my insurance adjuster, when in fact my case was handled by Rebecca Saunders." Michael's expression remained carefully neutral, though a slight flush crept up his neck, a tell I recognized from his childhood when caught in deception. "I was acting in your best interest," he responded, his tone measured. "The aftermath of a disaster is confusing for anyone, particularly someone your age dealing with displacement and significant decisions about property restoration versus replacement." "My age," I repeated, the phrase that had become a trigger for me. "You've referenced my age repeatedly as if it were a condition that automatically diminishes my capacity. That assumption is not only hurtful but demonstrably incorrect." I slid a sealed envelope across the table. "This contains the complete neuropsychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Elaine Moss 2 weeks ago. Dr. Moss is the leading geriatric cognitive specialist in this region, and her assessment conclusively documents that I possess above-average cognitive functioning with no impairments that would affect decision-making capacity." Michael made no move to take the envelope, his expression hardening. A single evaluation doesn't capture the reality of day-to-day functioning. As your son, I've observed concerning patterns of decision-making that suggest emotional attachment to your home is overriding practical considerations about your future needs. Practical considerations from whose perspective? I countered, my voice remaining calm despite the familiar frustration his patronizing tone evoked. Because I've made quite practical decisions about my recovery and future, based on both emotional and financial factors. I opened another folder, removing contractor reports, design modifications, and financial projections for my home restoration. My home is being restored with several age-friendly adaptations that will facilitate independent living for many years to come. These modifications include a curbless shower, wider doorways, lever door handles, improved lighting, and raised garden beds, all practical approaches to aging in place that address physical changes without sacrificing independence. Continued methodically, referencing the documentation before us. The financial projections demonstrate that remaining in my mortgage-free home, even with these adaptations, is substantially more economical than the entry fee and monthly costs at Evergreen Meadows. My teacher's pension, Social Security benefits, and modest savings are entirely sufficient for maintaining my home and lifestyle without financial strain. Michael leaned forward, his expression becoming more intense. Financial calculations don't account for the intangibles, Mom. What about when you need more help? When maintenance becomes too much? When you should be focused on enjoying your remaining years instead of managing property? The phrase remaining years hung in the air between us, reinforcing his persistent framing of my life as a diminishing resource rather than an ongoing journey. I'm not just maintaining property, Michael. I'm maintaining community connections, purpose, and autonomy, all factors associated with better health outcomes and quality of life for aging individuals. The research is quite clear on this. Patricia nodded approvingly, adding, the literature on successful aging consistently shows that remaining in familiar environments with established social connections often produces better outcomes than relocation, both physically and cognitively. Michael's expression flickered with frustration at Patricia's intervention. He turned his attention back to me, his tone shifting to something softer, more persuasive, the approach he likely used with difficult clients who needed gentle handling. Mom, I understand you value your independence. Everyone does. But aging requires adaptation, and sometimes that means accepting help and guidance from family who have your best interests at heart. I'm trying to ensure you're secure and cared. For as you get older, isn't that what you'd want me to do as your son? His appeal to familial obligation might have been effective weeks earlier, before I had discovered his deception. Now, it struck me as manipulative, using emotional leverage to achieve aims I had explicitly rejected. If securing my well-being were truly your priority, I replied carefully, you would have helped me rebuild after the flood rather than attempting to use that crisis to force a move I've consistently opposed. You would have consulted me about my preferences rather than making unilateral decisions about my future. You would have been honest about your actions rather than creating fictitious insurance adjusters and attempting to redirect my settlement, without my knowledge. I paused, allowing the weight of these actions to settle between us. Those aren't the behaviors of someone prioritizing my well-being. They're the actions of someone who believes they have the right to override my autonomy, because of my age. Michael's professional composure wavered momentarily, genuine emotion breaking through. You're making it sound calculated and sinister when I was just trying to help. Do you have any idea how worried I've been about you living alone as you get older? About getting a call in the middle of the night that you've fallen or worse? About you being isolated in that house if your health declines? The pain in his voice seemed genuine, and for a moment, I glimpsed the scared little boy beneath, the polished attorney, the child who had lost his father to abandonment and perhaps feared losing his mother to age and infirmity. This realization softened my approach slightly, though it didn't change the necessary boundaries. I understand those concerns are real for you, I acknowledged. But they don't justify deception or attempts to control my finances. There are appropriate ways to address worries about aging parents that don't involve undermining their agency. Patricia gently redirected us to the next agenda item. Sensing the conversation could easily spiral into emotional territory that might derail our objectives, Ms. Wilson has additional information to share regarding steps she's taken to secure her future independence. I nodded gratefully for the prompt, opening another folder containing my business documentation. While recovering from the flood, I've established a small business using my teaching expertise. English with Eleanor provides online tutoring in writing and literary analysis for high school students. I currently have 12 regular clients and several occasional students, with consistent weekly income that supplements my retirement funds. I passed Michael printouts showing my business registration, website screenshots, client testimonials, and recent income statements. His expression shifted from defensive to genuinely surprised as he reviewed the materials. "You created an online business?" he asked, the disbelief evident in his voice. "When did you learn to use this technology?" "During the months you were too busy to help me with flood recovery," I replied without hostility, simply stating fact. I took digital skills classes at the community center, then worked with a mentor to develop the business model and online platform. I've been operating successfully for nearly 2 months now. Michael looked genuinely stunned as he examined the website screenshots showing my professional profile, service offerings, and scheduling system. The testimonials from satisfied parents and students seemed to particularly impact him. Objective, evidence that others valued my continued professional contributions despite my age. "I had no idea," he murmured, almost to himself rather than to us. "You never mentioned any of this when we spoke." "You didn't ask," I pointed out gently. Our conversations focused exclusively on selling my home and moving to Evergreen Meadows. My activities, interests, and capabilities weren't part of that discussion. Patricia smoothly transitioned to the legal documents we had prepared. "Ms. Wilson has made several important updates to her legal arrangements that you should be aware of, Mr. Wilson." She presented copies of my updated advance directive, power of attorney, and trust documents. "As you'll note, Ms. Wilson has designated Harriet Jenkins as her healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney should she become incapacitated in the future. Her home has been placed in a revocable trust with specific provisions regarding its maintenance and disposition." Michael stared at the documents, the implications sinking in. For much of his adult life, he had been named in these roles. The presumptive decision-maker should I become unable to manage my own affairs. The revocation of this status represented a significant shift in our relationship. "You're removing me as your healthcare proxy?" he asked, hurt evident in his voice despite his attempt at professional detachment. "After everything I've done to look out for your future well-being, I'm designating someone whose vision of my well-being aligns with my own," I clarified. "Harriet respects my wish to remain in my home and community for as long as safely possible. She understands that my conception of quality of life includes independence and self-determination, not just physical security. These changes don't mean I don't value you as my son," I added, recognizing the personal rejection he might be feeling. "They simply ensure that my explicitly stated wishes will be respected if I'm ever unable to advocate for myself." Michael's attorney mindset reasserted itself as he scanned the documents more carefully. These are significant legal changes made during a period of displacement and stress. A case could be made that they don't reflect your settled intentions, but rather a temporary reaction to difficult circumstances. Patricia's expression remained professionally neutral, but her response was firm. Any such challenge would face substantial obstacles, including the neuropsychological evaluation confirming Ms. Wilson's decision-making capacity, the consistent pattern of her expressed preferences over many years, and the documented attempt to redirect her insurance settlement without her knowledge or consent, which establishes a clear conflict of interest for the previously named proxy. The clinical assessment of his potential legal challenge seemed to deflate Michael's resistance. For perhaps the first time in our difficult exchange, he appeared to truly see the comprehensive preparation and determination behind my actions. Not the impulsive reactions of a confused elderly woman, but the strategic decisions of someone fully capable of protecting her own interests. "What exactly do you want from me, Mom?" he finally asked, his tone a complex mixture of frustration, hurt, and dawning recognition that his plans for my future had been effectively countered. "I want you to acknowledge my right to make my own decisions, even when they differ from what you would choose for me," I replied, holding his gaze steadily. "I want you to understand that my age doesn't diminish my agency or capacity, and I want you to recognize that attempting to control my finances or living situation without my consent is not acceptable, regardless of your intentions." The directness of my response seemed to catch him off guard. For several moments, he was silent, processing the clear boundaries I had established and the comprehensive evidence supporting my capacity to set them. "I never meant to," he began, then stopped, reconsidering his words. "I genuinely believed I was acting in your best interest. The idea of you alone in that house after the flood, making major decisions about reconstruction, potentially vulnerable to contractors taking advantage, it worried me constantly." "I understand those worries," I acknowledged. "But the solution wasn't to take control away from me. It was to offer support that respected my autonomy." "And if I had?" he asked, a genuine question rather than a challenge. "If I had come to Millfield after the flood and offered to help with contractors and insurance while supporting your decision to rebuild, would things be different now?" The question held a poignancy that momentarily caught me off guard. The acknowledgement of a path not taken, a relationship that might have been strengthened rather than damaged by crisis. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Things would be very different. I've never wanted distance between us, Michael. I've only wanted respect for my choices and recognition of my continuing capacity." Something in his expression shifted then. A subtle softening, a glimpse of the son I remembered before professional success and physical distance had altered our relationship. For a brief moment, I saw recognition flicker across his features, perhaps understanding for the first time how his approach had felt from my perspective. Patricia gently guided us back to the practical matters at hand. To summarize today's discussion, Ms. Wilson has made her decisions regarding home restoration, business development, and legal arrangements. These decisions are appropriately documented and based on sound financial and personal considerations. The purpose of today's meeting was to inform you of these decisions and clarify expectations moving forward. Michael nodded slowly. The fight, gradually leaving his posture. "I hear what you're saying. I may not agree with all your choices, but I can see you've thought them through carefully." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. A small but significant shift from his previous dismissal of my decisions as emotional or impractical. "There's one additional matter," I said, opening the final folder I had prepared. "These are the records of my insurance claim and settlement. I want complete transparency about how these funds are being used for home restoration, so there can be no future questions about financial management." I presented detailed documentation of the insurance settlement, contractor agreements, modification, plans, and projected expenses. Monthly reports from the contractor will be forwarded to both you and Patricia, creating a clear record of the restoration process and associated costs. This transparency isn't legally required, but I believe it's important for rebuilding trust. Michael appeared genuinely surprised by this voluntary accountability. "I appreciate that, Mom. It's more information than I expected after everything that's happened." "I'm not interested in punishing you, Michael," I explained. "I'm interested in establishing a new relationship based on mutual respect and recognition of boundaries. Transparency about the insurance funds is part of that foundation." As our meeting concluded, The emotional atmosphere had shifted noticeably from the tense confrontation of its beginning. Nothing had been fully resolved. Too much hurt and misunderstanding remained for instant reconciliation. But the air had cleared enough for tentative steps forward. "Would you like to see the house?" I asked as we gathered our materials. "The renovations are about 60% complete. You might be interested in the adaptations we're implementing for aging in place." The invitation was deliberate, an opportunity for Michael to witness firsthand the thoughtful planning behind my decision to remain in my home rather than relying on his assumptions about my capabilities. He hesitated briefly before nodding. "I would, actually, if you're willing to show me." Patricia and I exchanged glances, a silent confirmation that this represented progress. "We could go now, if you have time," I suggested. "Harriet is waiting in the reception area and could drive us." 20 minutes later, our somewhat awkward group arrived at my home on Maple Street. The exterior restoration was nearly complete, with fresh paint, repaired porch railings, and improved drainage systems visible from the street. The garden remained a work in progress, but the raised beds were in place, designed for easier access, as I aged. As I led Michael through the house, pointing out the modifications designed to support independent living, wider doorways, lever handles, strategic grab bars that blended with the decor, improved lighting, his expression gradually shifted from skeptical to thoughtful. "These changes are well-planned," he admitted, examining the curb-less shower with its decorative seating that served both aesthetic and practical purposes. "I wouldn't have thought some of these adaptations would be possible without completely rebuilding. The contractor specializes in aging-in-place modifications," I explained. "He's found ways to incorporate accessibility features without sacrificing the character of the home." In the kitchen, Michael paused before a wall calendar filled with appointments. Tutoring sessions, garden club meetings, library volunteer shifts, digital skills classes. The schedule reflected an active, engaged life, a visible contradiction to his image of me as isolated and declining. "You're busy," he observed, a note of surprise still evident in his voice. "I've always been busy," I replied simply. "That didn't change when I turned 70. We ended our tour in the partially restored garden, where the raised beds were already prepared for fall planting. The greenhouse had been rebuilt on a slightly elevated foundation with wider doors to accommodate mobility aids if they became necessary in the future. "This is where I'm happiest," I told him, running my hand along the edge of a cedar planter. "The garden connects me to the changing seasons, gives me purpose, provides food for myself and the community food bank. It's not just a hobby, it's a vital part of my well-being." Michael nodded, seeming to truly see this aspect of my life perhaps for the first time. "It's impressive what you've created here, and what you're rebuilding now." The comment felt like the first genuine acknowledgement of my agency since the flood, recognition that I was actively creating my environment rather than passively inhabiting it until decline inevitably forced change. "Would you like to stay for lunch?" I offered, testing the fragile truce between us. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches in the temporary kitchen, but it would give us a chance to talk more informally. He checked his watch, visibly conflicted. "I wish I could, but I have a conference call at 2 that I can't reschedule. Maybe next time?" "Next time," I agreed, accepting both his refusal and the implicit promise of future visits. As Harriet prepared to drive me back to my temporary apartment, Michael lingered by his car, seemingly struggling with something he wanted to say. "Mom," he finally began, his professional polish temporarily set aside, "I still worry about you being alone as you get older. That's not going to change, no matter how capable you are now." "I understand that," I acknowledged. "Concern is natural. Between family members. It's how that concern is expressed that matters." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to see that. I don't want to get a call someday that something has happened and I'm 3 hours away." The fear beneath his controlling behavior emerged more clearly in that moment. Not just worry about my well-being, but anxiety about his ability to respond in crisis, perhaps guilt about the distance he had maintained for years. That's a risk. In any family situation, regardless of age, I pointed out gently. But if it would help ease your mind, we could set up regular check-ins, not because I need supervision, but because that connection would be valuable for both of us. I'd like that, he said, relief evident in his expression. Maybe a video call every Sunday? Like we used to do before the flood, but more consistent? Sunday. Evenings would work well with my tutoring schedule, I agreed. And perhaps you and your family could visit once a month when the house is fully restored. The guest room will be more comfortable than before, and the grandchildren might enjoy helping in the garden. The tentative smile that crossed his face reminded me of the little boy who had once proudly presented me with muddy handfuls of dandelions from our yard. They would like that. Emma's been asking about your cookies recently. This small, ordinary exchange, making plans for family visits, acknowledging grandchildren's preferences, felt like the first normal moment between us in months. Not complete resolution, not full understanding, but a willingness to move forward with greater awareness of each other's needs and boundaries. As Michael drove away with a final wave, Harriet squeezed my hand supportively. That went better than expected. It's a beginning, I agreed cautiously. The real test will be whether the boundaries hold over time, whether he truly sees me differently now. You've made that almost impossible to avoid, Harriet observed with a smile. The woman who greeted him today, business owner, home renovator, legal strategist, isn't someone who can be easily dismissed or managed. You've changed the dynamic fundamentally. She was right. The confrontation hadn't just been about asserting boundaries around specific decisions. It had been about transforming how Michael perceived me. The mother he had always known, the woman who had sacrificed consistently for his benefit, who had put his needs above her own for decades, had been replaced by someone who confidently advocated for her own interests and backed that advocacy with strategic preparation. The shift wasn't complete after a single meeting, of course. Old patterns of interaction wouldn't disappear instantly, and Michael's concern about my independent living arrangement wouldn't vanish simply because I had effectively countered his attempt to change it. But something fundamental had changed in our relationship, a rebalancing of power that acknowledged my continuing agency despite advancing age. In the weeks that followed our confrontation, Michael maintained the weekly video calls we had agreed upon. Initially somewhat stilted, these conversations gradually became more natural as we established new patterns of interaction. He asked about my tutoring business with what seemed like genuine interest, and I inquired about his cases without the underlying resentment that had colored our previous exchanges. When my home restoration was finally completed 3 months after our meeting in Patricia's office, Michael and his family attended the small gathering I hosted to celebrate my return. The tension between us hadn't completely dissipated, but it had evolved into something more manageable, a cautious respect replacing his previous condescension. "The house looks wonderful," Amanda commented as I gave them a tour, her tone suggesting genuine surprise rather than the polite obligation of previous visits. "These adaptations are really thoughtfully designed." "Grandma, can we help plant stuff in your new garden boxes?" Emma asked excitedly, already examining the raised beds with interest. "Dad said they're special because you can reach everything without bending." "I'd love your help," I told her warmly. "I've saved the herb garden specially for you to plant tomorrow morning, if you'd like." The weekend visit passed more comfortably than I had dared hope, with Michael making visible efforts to acknowledge my independence rather than focus on potential limitations. When he noticed the small office space I had created for my tutoring business, complete with professional lighting, acoustic panels, and an ergonomic chair, his comment reflected a shift in perception. "You've really built something impressive." "Here," he observed, watching as I demonstrated the scheduling software and online payment system. How many students do you have now? 15 regulars and several occasional clients, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Enough. That I'm considering bringing on another retired English teacher to handle overflow if the growth continues. The look that crossed his face, a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect, suggested that this tangible evidence of my continued professional capability had impacted him more deeply than any arguments or documentation could have. You're not just maintaining, you're expanding, he said thoughtfully. Building something new at a stage when most people are winding down. Age is just one factor in life, Michael, I replied. It doesn't define capability or potential. That's what I've been trying to help you understand. He nodded slowly, seemingly absorbing this perspective in a way he hadn't been able to during our more adversarial exchanges. I'm beginning to see that. It's not how I was thinking about this stage of life. That simple acknowledgement that his conception of aging might have been limited or flawed, represented perhaps the most significant progress in our healing relationship. Not complete understanding, not perfect alignment, but an opening to reconsider entrenched assumptions about what aging means and how it shapes capability. As Michael and his family prepared to leave on Sunday afternoon, he lingered behind while Amanda and the children waited in the car. Mom, I want you to know I've been reflecting a lot since our meeting with your attorney, he said, his expression more vulnerable than I had seen in years. I still worry about you. That probably won't change, but I'm trying to separate my concern from a need to control outcomes. That's all I've asked for, I replied, genuinely moved by this acknowledgement. Concern expressed through support rather than control makes all the difference. He nodded, glancing around at the home I had fought to rebuild, the business I had, created from crisis, the life I had reclaimed on my own terms. You've always been strong. I think I forgot that somewhere along the way. Started seeing age instead of seeing you. The insight seemed to surprise him as much as it touched me. In that moment, I glimpsed something healing between us. Not complete resolution, but a path forward based on growing mutual respect rather than contested authority. We'll be back next month, he promised as he headed toward the car. Emma won't stop talking about helping with the fall garden planting. I'll be looking forward to it, I replied, and for the first time in many months, the words felt entirely true. As I watched them drive away, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 6 months. The flood that had nearly destroyed my home had ultimately washed away pretenses and assumptions in my closest relationship, creating space for something more authentic to emerge. My son had abandoned me when I needed him most, a painful reality I couldn't deny, but that abandonment had forced me to discover strengths I might otherwise never have recognized in myself. The shocking decision to fight for my autonomy rather than submit to others' visions of my future hadn't just preserved my independence. It had transformed my understanding of what remained possible in this stage of life. I wasn't merely continuing or maintaining. I was growing, creating, contributing in ways I hadn't imagined before crisis created opportunity. That evening, I sat on my rebuilt porch, watching twilight settle over the neighborhood I had refused to leave. From next door, Mrs. Abernathy called a greeting as she collected her mail. Across the street, the Jensen children waved excitedly, asking if Garden Club would meet on Wednesday as usual. A former student now in college stopped by with fresh banana bread, staying to update me on her English literature studies. This web of connections, this belonging, was what Michael had been unable to see when he calculated the value of my home solely in terms of equity and resale potential. It was what I had instinctively protected when I rejected the sterile safety of Evergreen Meadows for the living community of Maple Street. As darkness fell completely, I opened my laptop to prepare for the next day's tutoring sessions. On the ESI screen, a notification appeared. An email from a parent whose daughter had just received early acceptance to her first-choice college, crediting our writing sessions with transforming her application essays. "You've given Madison more than just writing skills," the mother wrote. "You've shown her that age is no barrier to excellence, that reinvention is possible at any stage of life. Your example has inspired her as much as your teaching. Thank you for being not just her tutor, but her model of resilience." The message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Recognition that my journey of the past months had ripples extending beyond my own life, touching others in ways I hadn't anticipated. The flood had taken much from me temporarily, but what had emerged from those waters was something unexpected and precious. A new vision of aging that rejected diminishment for development, limitation for possibility. My son had abandoned me when I needed him most, but in that painful space, I had found not just the strength to defend my present, but the courage to create a future entirely my own. 2 years have passed since that pivotal confrontation in Patricia's office. At 75, I wake each morning in the home I fought to keep, surrounded by the garden I've continued to nurture and adapt. The raised beds burst with seasonal vegetables and flowers, the greenhouse shelters delicate seedlings through winter months, and the accessibility features throughout my property have made daily tasks easier without sacrificing independence or beauty. What began as a desperate fight to maintain my autonomy has evolved into something I never anticipated, a template for reimagining aging that has rippled far beyond my personal circumstances. The story of my journey, from flood victim to digital entrepreneur, from dismissed elder to community catalyst, has become part of Millfield's narrative of renewal after disaster. My business, English with Eleanor, has grown beyond my initial vision of part-time tutoring into a flourishing enterprise. I now employ 3 other retired teachers who share my approach to personalized writing instruction. Together, we serve over 60 students across the country, from high schoolers struggling with basic essay structure to college applicants crafting personal statements, and even adults returning to education after years away. Our oldest client is 86, a gentleman determined to complete the college degree that circumstances forced him to abandon in his youth. "You're the only writing service that didn't treat me like a curiosity," he told me during our initial consultation. "Everyone else seemed more interested in my age than my educational goals. You just asked about my writing challenges and how you could help." His comment highlighted what has become our unintentional market niche, creating age-blind educational support that focuses on capability rather than category. Students come to us not because of who we are demographically, but because of what we offer pedagogically. Patient, personalized instruction from educators with decades of experience recognizing and addressing specific learning needs. The business success has been gratifying, providing financial security beyond what my teacher's pension alone could offer. But the deeper satisfaction comes from the model it represents. Proof that expertise doesn't expire at retirement, that technological adaptation isn't limited by age, and that meaningful contribution can continue through decades often dismissed as merely golden years. Zoe Chen, whose digital skills classes initially sparked my online journey, has become both friend and business partner. 6 months after my confrontation with Michael, she approached me with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking about how your experience could help others," she said during one of our regular coffee meetings. The combination of flood recovery, family conflict over autonomy, digital business development at 73, it's a powerful template for resilience and reinvention that others could learn from. Her suggestion, document my journey in a series of workshops for seniors facing similar life transitions, health challenges, disaster recovery, family pressures to surrender independence, or simply the desire to develop new skills and purpose in retirement. Millfield Senior Transitions, we called it initially, a modest 6-week workshop series hosted at the community center where my digital journey had begun. 12 participants enrolled in that first cohort, each facing some version of the challenges I had navigated: widows contemplating downsizing under family pressure, retirees seeking meaningful engagement beyond leisure activities, elders recovering from health setbacks while defending their continued independence. "What made you decide to fight rather than concede?" asked Margaret Simmons, a 78-year-old widow whose children were urging her to sell her farm and move to assisted living. "Wasn't it exhausting to push back against your own family?" "More exhausting than surrendering my home and community would have been," I replied honestly. "Independence requires energy, certainly. But dependence extracts a different kind of toll, one that affects identity and purpose in profound ways." These discussions moved beyond practical skills like digital literacy or legal protection into deeper questions about autonomy, family dynamics, and societal assumptions about aging. Participants shared strategies for maintaining boundaries with well-meaning but controlling relatives, documented their ongoing capabilities to counter presumptions of decline, and supported each other's decisions even when those decisions involved risk. "My son doesn't understand why I'm learning pottery at 80, confided Ruth Johnson during one session. "He sees the possibility of me dropping a clay piece or straining my back as reasons to avoid the activity entirely. He doesn't calculate the joy and purpose it brings into the equation." "The risk of falling is real," acknowledged Thomas Kelly, a former construction worker managing Parkinson's while determined to remain in his home. "But the certainty of diminishment if I stop moving, stop engaging, stop challenging myself, that's the greater threat to my well-being." These conversations, honest, nuanced, deeply reflective, created something vital: a community of elders determined to remain authors of their own stories rather than passive characters in narratives written by others, however well-intentioned those others might be. Word spread about our workshops, drawing participants from neighboring communities and eventually attracting the attention of regional senior advocacy organizations. 6 months after our initial series, Zoe and I were invited to present our approach at the State Conference on Aging, sharing the podium with geriatric physicians, elder law specialists, and policy experts. "What distinguishes the Millfield model," noted the conference director in her introduction, "is its emphasis on elder agency rather than protection. While acknowledging the real challenges of aging, it rejects the binary thinking that often forces older adults to choose between absolute independence and complete surrender of autonomy." Our presentation, titled "Beyond Binary Aging: Collaborative Independence in Later Life," resonated deeply with the audience of professionals and advocates. The questions afterward reflected genuine interest in how our approach might be replicated in other communities, adapted for different socioeconomic contexts, or integrated into existing senior service models. "The key is listening to what elders themselves identify as priorities," I emphasized during the discussion. "Too often, well-meaning programs focus on what professionals assume older adults need rather than what they actually value. Safety matters, certainly, but purpose, community, and agency matter equally, sometimes more." Following the conference, requests for our workshop materials and consulting services grew steadily. What had begun as a personal journey of necessity had evolved into a community initiative and was now emerging as a model with broader applications. Zoe's technical expertise and my lived experience complemented each other perfectly, bridging generational perspectives and challenging assumptions from both directions. Through all of this unexpected professional development, my relationship with Michael continued its gradual healing. The weekly video calls we had established after our confrontation became a consistent connection point, evolving from somewhat awkward exchanges into genuine conversation. His monthly family visits resumed as promised, with Emma and James increasingly engaged in garden projects and baking lessons with their grandmother. The most significant shift became evident during a conversation 6 months after our confrontation, when Michael called unexpectedly on a Tuesday evening. "Mom, I've been thinking about our discussions regarding aging in place and elder autonomy, he began, his tone unusually tentative. There's a case coming across my desk that involves a situation similar to what we experienced. Adult children, attempting to force their mother into assisted living against her wishes, using a minor health incident as leverage. That sounds familiar, I acknowledged, careful to keep accusation from my voice. Too familiar, he admitted with a self-awareness that surprised me. In the past, I might have automatically sympathized with the children's perspective, seeing their concerns about safety as paramount. But now, I'm seeing nuances I would have missed before. He went on to explain that he was considering declining the case, uncomfortable with the tactics the children were employing despite their apparent concern for their mother's well-being. They've already listed her home with a realtor mom, while she was briefly hospitalized for pneumonia. They haven't even discussed alternatives that might allow her to remain in her community with appropriate supports. The parallel to his own earlier approach was striking, though he didn't explicitly acknowledge it. What mattered more was the evident shift in his perspective, a willingness to consider elder autonomy as a value equal to safety, to recognize that well-being encompasses more than physical security. "Would you be willing to speak with them?" he asked hesitantly. "Not as my mother, but as an advocate who understands both sides of this situation? You might help them see alternatives they haven't considered, ways to address legitimate safety concerns without completely overriding their mother's preferences." The request represented a profound evolution in Michael's understanding, recognition of my expertise rather than merely my experience, acknowledgement that my journey might offer wisdom valuable to others navigating similar terrain. I'd be willing to meet with them, I agreed, touched by this unexpected validation. Not to take sides, but to help broaden the conversation beyond binary choices. That initial consultation led to others, as Michael occasionally referred families navigating elder care decisions to me for perspective. Sometimes these conversations involved adult children genuinely seeking balanced approaches to supporting aging parents. Other times they included elders themselves, fighting to maintain agency amid health challenges or family pressure. "You've become something of an elder advocate," he commented during a Sunday dinner at my home, about a year after our confrontation. "I've heard colleagues refer clients to that consultant in Millfield who specializes in creative aging solutions." I'm not sure I would have chosen this path, I admitted, thinking of the flood that had catalyzed my journey. But there's something fitting about using my experience to help others facing similar challenges. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "You've always been a teacher at heart. This is just a different classroom with different lessons." His recognition of continuity in my life's work, rather than rupture or decline, represented significant growth in our relationship, seeing me as evolving rather than diminishing with age. The most profound indicator of this shift came 18 months after our confrontation, when Michael called with unexpected news. "Mom, I've been offered a teaching position at Lawrenceville Community College, an adjunct role in their paralegal program. It would mean reducing my caseload at the firm, but after 15 years of corporate law, I'm finding myself drawn to education." The surprise wasn't just his career pivot, but what followed. "Your journey has made me reconsider a lot of things," he continued, a vulnerability in his voice I rarely heard. "Watching you reinvent your teaching career digitally at 73, seeing how you've created something meaningful and impactful, it's made me question whether I'm using my own skills and knowledge in ways that truly matter." This remarkable admission, that my late-life reinvention had inspired his mid-life reassessment, represented the ultimate reversal of the dynamic he had tried to impose during the flood crisis. Rather than the declining elder needing guidance, from the established adult, I had become the pathfinder demonstrating possibilities he hadn't considered for himself. "Teaching suits you," I told him warmly, remembering how effectively he had explained complex concepts to his children. "You have your father's patience and your mother's love of language. Those are valuable qualities in the classroom." I was hoping you might have some advice, he said with a laugh that acknowledged the irony. The expert becoming the student. I know. The best teachers always remain students, I reminded him. That's how wisdom accumulates rather than calcifies with age. Our conversation that evening, Michael seeking my professional guidance rather than offering unsolicited direction, marked a balancing of our relationship that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. The crisis that had nearly severed our bond had ultimately transformed it, creating space for mutual respect previously missing. The healing in our family relationship paralleled the ongoing evolution of my community work. What began as personal necessity, fighting for autonomy after disaster, expanded into local workshops, regional presentations, and eventually a comprehensive approach we called the Millfield Model for Collaborative Independence. Working with Patricia Vega, my elder law attorney, and Dr. Elaine Moss, the neuropsychologist who had documented my cognitive capacity, Zoe and I developed materials that addressed both practical and philosophical aspects of aging autonomy. Legal protections elders should consider: technologies that support independent living, communication strategies for navigating family pressure, and deeper explorations of purpose and meaning in later decades. The greatest threat to elder autonomy isn't physical limitation, but presumed incapacity, Patricia often emphasized in our joint presentations. Creating preemptive documentation of continuing competence is as important as establishing advance directives for future incapacity. Dr. Moss contributed insights on cognitive assessment and the importance of distinguishing normal age-related changes from actual impairment. Memory changes with age, certainly, she would explain. But wisdom, judgment, and decision-making capability often remain robust well into advanced years, particularly when regularly exercised. Zoe's technological expertise continually expanded our vision of what was possible. Adaptations that seemed futuristic 5 years ago are now affordable and accessible, she would demonstrate, showcasing home monitoring systems that respected privacy while providing safety, digital connection tools designed for users with varying capabilities, and assistive technologies that extended independent functioning. My contribution centered on lived experience, the reality of navigating both external pressures and internal doubts about aging independence. The voice in your head questioning your continuing capability can be as limiting as family members' expressed concerns, I would acknowledge. Cultivating evidence of ongoing competence isn't just for others' benefit, it's for maintaining your own confidence when doubts arise. Together, our interdisciplinary approach offered something different from typical senior service models. Not protection of vulnerable elders, but empowerment of capable individuals navigating predictable challenges. Not management of decline, but maximization of continuing capacity. Not choosing between independence and support, but creatively blending both according to individual circumstances and preferences. On my 75th birthday, Millfield Community Center hosted a surprise celebration that reflected how thoroughly my personal journey had become intertwined with community renewal. What I had expected to be a small gathering of friends turned out to include workshop participants, tutoring clients and their families, seniors who had implemented our collaborative independence model, and community leaders interested in expanding the approach. Eleanor Wilson exemplifies what we now call generative aging, Mayor Thompson said in her remarks. Rather than merely maintaining or declining in later years, she has created new value for herself and our entire community. Her response to personal disaster has become a template for collective resilience. The mayor's framing captured something essential about the journey of the past 2 years. What began as necessity had evolved into opportunity, not just for me, but for a community rethinking assumptions about age, capability, and contribution. Michael attended the celebration with his family, now regular visitors to Millfield since his teaching position at Lawrenceville Community College brought him to the area weekly. The tension that had once characterized our interactions had gradually transformed into mutual respect, though occasional echoes of old patterns sometimes emerged when health concerns arose. "You're looking tired, Mom," he commented with familiar concern as the celebration wound down. These events can be draining at any age. At any age, I agreed, emphasizing the universality rather than the specificity to my years. "You look a bit tired yourself after a full semester of teaching on top of your legal practice," he laughed, acknowledging the gentle correction. "Fair point. We're both doing a lot, just different things than either of us imagined 2 years ago." That evening, after guests had departed and my home grew quiet again, I sat in my garden watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness. The raised beds I had designed during flood recovery were now established features, bursting with vegetables and flowers that required less physical strain to tend. The greenhouse gleamed in the moonlight, its improved structure both more accessible and more resilient against future weather events. My phone chimed with a notification, a message from a former workshop participant sharing news of her successful boundary-setting conversation with well-meaning but controlling children. "I used the scripts we practiced," she wrote. "For the first time, they really listened when I explained that helping doesn't mean deciding. Thank you for showing me this was possible." Messages like these arrived regularly now, each representing another elder maintaining autonomy, another family finding balance between concern and control, another community discovering alternatives to binary thinking about aging. The cumulative impact of these individual stories suggested something larger, a gradual shift in how aging could be experienced and supported when default assumptions were questioned and creative alternatives explored. Looking back on the journey, that began with disaster and betrayal, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: lingering sadness about the rifts that had formed, profound gratitude for the growth that had emerged from crisis, and a sense of purpose more vibrant than I had experienced since retirement from formal teaching. The flood that nearly destroyed my home had washed away more than physical structures. It had swept aside limiting perceptions and expectations, creating space for reinvention that would have seemed impossible in calmer circumstances. My son's abandonment during that crisis, painful as it was, had forced self-reliance that revealed capabilities I might never have discovered otherwise. The shocking decision to fight for my autonomy rather than surrender to others' visions for my future hadn't just preserved my independence. It had catalyzed transformations rippling far beyond my individual circumstances. What began as personal necessity had evolved into community resource, professional model, and family reconciliation. At 75, I wasn't merely continuing my life as before. I was creating something new, contributing something valuable, and challenging fundamental assumptions about what later life could encompass. The crisis that might have diminished me had instead revealed capacity for growth I hadn't recognized in myself. My phone chimed again, a text from Michael with a photo of Emma proudly displaying her first college acceptance letter. "She mentioned you in her application essay," he wrote. "Said her grandmother taught her that age is no barrier to reinvention. Thought you should know the impact you're having across generations." The message brought unexpected tears, recognition that my journey had influenced not just peers facing similar challenges, but younger generations forming their conceptions of aging and possibility. Emma wouldn't approach her later decades with the limiting assumptions her father had held. She would carry a different template, one that encompassed continuing growth rather than inevitable decline. This, perhaps, was the most meaningful outcome of the path I had traveled since the flood, not just reclaiming my own autonomy, but helping reshape cultural narratives about aging that affect us all. The personal had become communal. The defensive had become generative. Resistance had transformed into creation. My son had indeed abandoned me when I needed him most, a painful reality I had come to accept rather than deny. But that abandonment had created space for discovery and development I might never have experienced otherwise. The shocking decision to fight rather than concede hadn't just changed my circumstances, it had transformed my understanding of what remained possible in a life society often assumes is finished with meaningful evolution. As I finally went inside, leaving the firefly-lit garden to its nighttime rhythms, I thought about the classes I would teach tomorrow, the workshop I would lead next week, the presentation Zoe and I were preparing for next month's regional conference. At 75, my calendar remained full, my contributions continued to matter, and my capacity for growth had not diminished but evolved. The floodwaters had receded long ago, but the clarity they had ultimately brought remained, showing me not just what I could save from my past, but what I could create for my future. The journey wasn't finished. It had simply revealed itself as more expansive, more promising, more generative than I had imagined possible when society's narratives about aging had limited my vision of what might lie ahead. My son had abandoned me when I needed him most, but in that painful space, I had found not just myself but a purpose larger than personal survival. I had discovered that even life's most difficult chapters can open into unexpected possibilities when we refuse to accept others' limiting definitions of who we are and what remains possible, regardless of the number of years behind us. This is what I would share with my workshop participants tomorrow, with Emma when she visited this weekend, with audience members at next month's conference. Age brings not just inevitable limitations, but unique possibilities. Wisdom is not merely remembering the past, but reimagining the future. And the capacity for meaningful contribution doesn't end at some arbitrary birthday, but evolves through every stage of a life fully embraced. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. I harbored no illusions about the physical challenges aging would eventually bring. But I would face those challenges as I had faced the flood and its aftermath, with creativity, community support, and unwavering commitment to remaining the author of my own story for as long as capacity allowed. That, ultimately, was the legacy I hoped to leave, not just for my son and grandchildren, but for everyone whose lives intersected with mine. Aging isn't a surrender, but a continuation. Later, life isn't an epilogue, but another chapter with its own unique possibilities. And the capacity for meaningful growth doesn't diminish with years, but transforms into something equally valuable if we refuse to accept the limiting narratives others would write for us. My son had abandoned me when I needed him most, but that abandonment had ultimately freed me to discover that what I needed most had been within me all along. The courage to chart my own course, the wisdom to adapt rather than surrender, and the determination to create a vision of aging that reflected my continuing capacity rather than others' limiting assumptions. The flood had taken much, but what remained, what I had rebuilt from those waters, was stronger, clearer, and more purposeful than what had come before. Not despite my age, but because of it. Because 75 years of living had taught me that every ending contains the seeds of new beginning for those willing to plant and nurture them, regardless of the season of life in which they find themselves. So that's my story. How abandonment during crisis led to unexpected renewal and purpose. If you're watching this and finding yourself concerned about maintaining autonomy as you age, remember that preparation creates protection. Document your continuing capacity, build strong community connections, learn new skills that demonstrate ongoing competence, and create legal safeguards before they're needed. And if you're a younger viewer with aging parents or grandparents, I urge you to look beyond societal narratives about decline. See the continuing capability, the wisdom accumulated through decades of experience, the potential for ongoing contribution that doesn't end at retirement. Support without controlling, protect without diminishing, and recognize that every stage of life contains possibilities for meaningful growth and purpose. Remember, age brings wisdom, experience, and perspective that deserve respect. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even your well-meaning family members. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.